Welcome to Granny's Justice, a place where secrets are spoken and silence finally ends.
They say betrayal cuts deepest when it comes from family. Mine came dressed in pearls and southern charm,
With a casserole dish in her hands and the word Momma on her lips. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't slam doors. She smiled and slowly turned my son's heart away from me. The boy I rocked to sleep, the child I prayed for every night, now looked at me like I was a burden.
My name is Evelyn Rose Carter. I'm 79 years old from Savannah, Georgia. Before I tell you everything, I want to know you. Tell me your name, your city, your country in the comments. Because betrayal like this doesn't wear one accent. It doesn't live in one home. It can happen anywhere, to any mother, in any family. This is my story. I've lived in this little white house for over 50 years. Creaky floorboards, a porch swing that moans in the heat, and a magnolia tree that has seen more seasons than most marriages last. I rocked babies on that porch, watched fireflies with Walter, cried into my hands when no one was around to hear. This home carried my laughter and later, my silence. I raised 3 children there to daughters and my baby boy, Michael. He was my miracle, born after 2 miscarriages. I prayed with my hand on my belly until my voice grew hoarse. When God gave me Michael, I swore I would raise him in the light. He had a dimple in his left cheek, curly brown hair that no comb could tame. He followed me everywhere, dragged a chair beside me in the kitchen just to stir the pot. He held the hymnal in church even when he couldn't read the words. He'd slip his small hand into mine during prayer. He called me his best friend. Walter died when Michael was 16, sudden, cruel, right there in the driveway with groceries at his feet. After that, Michael and I leaned on each other in ways we had never needed to before. We were each other's world. Then Rebecca arrived. A peach pie from the bakery, pearls on her ears, a blue dress, and a smile too polished to be real. Michael glowed with her beside him. I wanted to like her, for his sake. He laughed again, and I hadn't heard that laugh in years. I opened my home. I gave them the master bedroom. I moved downstairs without complaint. I made their dinners, folded their sheets, watered their plants. But sometimes when you give everything, you disappear. Little things changed first. My spoon rest, my wallpaper, the cross above the living room doorway. It wasn't just the house she was redecorating. She was reshaping the life inside it. Michael stopped sitting with me on the porch. Dinner turned into whispers I couldn't hear. I overheard her once say, "She's just lonely. You know how older folks get." She said it like I was a broken chair she had to dust off. And slowly, my son began to believe her. That night, I sat on the porch swing alone. The magnolia tree didn't bloom that season. It never had before. Some say trees don't feel grief. But I looked at those bare branches and wondered if maybe they understood more than we gave them credit for. Tell me in the comments what city, what country are you listening from right now? Because somewhere out there, another mother is sitting under her own silent tree, wondering if anyone else understands her pain. I used to believe houses held memories, that if the walls had heard enough laughter, they'd keep it alive. But now, my house didn't recognize me anymore. And maybe that's because my son didn't either. It was a Tuesday. I baked cornbread, polished the coffee table, wore my yellow dress, the one Michael once said made me look like sunshine. My church group was supposed to meet. By 5 o'clock, no one came. Later, Michael said, Rebecca told them it was rescheduled. Thought you needed rest. I hadn't said a word about rest. Rebecca just smiled, wiping the counter without looking at me. You seem tired, Miss Evelyn. And Michael sighed at me like I was being dramatic. Mom, not everything is an attack. You always make things about you. Those words clung to me like smoke in my lungs. Rebecca locked Walter's study upstairs. My tea set vanished for storage. The thermostat made my room colder than the rest of the house. My mail disappeared. I began to write everything down. Every call, every missing thing. But when I showed Michael my notes, he chuckled. Mom, you're obsessive, not careful, not attentive, obsessive. One night, I called my cousin Martha. I poured everything out about the changes, the whispers, the missing pieces of my life. That's emotional abuse, Evelyn, she said. She's isolating you. The worst kind of abuse doesn't leave bruises. It leaves doubt. After that, I paid attention. I noticed her hand on Michael's whenever I spoke too long. I noticed the way my coffee mug disappeared until only theirs remained. I noticed how my son's eyes slid away from mine. Then came the day they told me to move. Rebecca's sister needs a place to stay, Michael said. We think it might be best if you stayed with Aunt Lillian for a while. The laundry basket fell from my hands. Socks scattered like bodies on the floor. You want me to leave my own house? It's not forever, he said. Rebecca added softly, you'll be more comfortable there. They packed my clothes, labeled boxes with my name. Not Mom, not Mama, just Evelyn. Like I was a tenant. At T. Lillian's, the bed creaked. The air smelled of lavender and old books. It wasn't home, but it wasn't betrayal either. I stopped hearing from Michael. Weeks passed, then months. No calls, no letters. Rebecca had erased me. And my son let her. If you're still here with me, don't just listen in silence. Write your name, your city, your country below. Because betrayal doesn't belong to just Georgia. It belongs to every corner of the world where a mother's voice is ignored. They say silence is peaceful. The kind I lived in after Michael and Rebecca moved me out wasn't peace. It was a vacuum. It pressed against my ribs like deep water, made the hours long and airless, and left my thoughts echoing back at me with no soft place to land. I slept in my sister Lillian's guest room, a square of borrowed quiet with a quilt that smelled faintly of lavender and old books. My life fit into one suitcase. I set out 3 framed photographs on the dresser like anchors against the drift. Walter holding baby Michael, the 3 of us under the magnolia tree, and one of me in a yellow dress on a Sunday when the light was kind. A ceramic lighthouse lamp flickered when the power blinked, and sometimes I watched its false little beacon and wondered what was still trying to find me. Before I go on, tell me where you are listening from. Write your name, your city, your country in the comments. Map it out for me, so I know this voice doesn't vanish in a single room in Savannah. Because of what happened to me has a twin in your town. Your words might just be the hand another mother needs tonight. My birthday arrived that September like a visitor who didn't bother to knock. 79 candles is too many for a small cake. So Lillian made one big circle of coconut frosting, bless her heart. Though lemon is what I love, and stuck a single candle in the middle like a joke we were trying not to say aloud. The ceiling fan ticked. The wax ran. We each took a slice we didn't really want, and I kept waiting for the sound of a message arriving, for the old ringtone Michael set for me years ago. 3 soft chimes, his idea of fancy. Nothing came. No call, no text, not even the silly Facebook banner. Rebecca had changed my password months back to help with tech, and I let her, because letting was how I had learned to survive in my own house. After Lillian went to bed, I sat alone and tried to pray, but the words I needed wouldn't come. What arrived instead was a question that bruised as it formed. Did he ever really love me, or did I mistake duty for devotion? It shamed me to wonder it. Shame sits heavy, but not heavier than silence. Small things tell the larger truth if you stare at them long enough. I found a crumpled receipt in my handbag when I reached for toothpaste money the next morning. It was dated 3 days earlier, from a place I didn't know, Lakeview Wellness Center. $410 for a couple session. The billing name said Michael Carter. On the back, in Rebecca's neat little loops, were notes that made my fingers shake so hard I had to put the paper down and pick it up again. Gaslighting checklist. She forgets conversations she thinks we're hiding things. Possibly early dementia. Push Michael to get distance. Use safety angle. There are moments when a person you dislike becomes, for one breathless second, terrifying. Not because they are loud, but because you see the outline of a plan. It wasn't just that she lied about me. She'd prepared the lies, cataloged them, practiced them like a speech. I went hunting through Lillian's attic that night for the leather-bound journal Walter gave me on our 10th anniversary. The one I used to write in after the children were asleep and the dishwasher hummed like steady rain. It was dusty, smelled like cedar and mothballs. I opened to a blank page and began to build a record. Not a story meant to be pretty, not prayers, facts, dates, times, exact phrases. The day my pills got misplaced, the night the thermostat in my room at the house clicked down to 60 though the rest of the place was warm. The afternoon my Bible disappeared and Rebecca smiled and said it must have gone out with the donation bags. As if scripture were clutter, each entry steadied me. Ink is a kind of spine. Once you put a thing on paper, it doesn't get to pretend it didn't happen. If Rebecca was rewriting me in Michael's mind, then I would write myself back line by line until no one could erase me without first seeing what they were doing. A month later, Lillian insisted I come back to church. Just for an hour, she said, just to hear something besides my old radio. My knees complained on the steps. My hands felt like rusty hinges. But when I stepped into that sanctuary, the red carpet worn soft by decades of sorrow and weddings and all the Sundays between, I felt a small, bright thread pull taut inside me. Not forgiveness. I am too honest to call it that. Not even hope. Just clarity. Rebecca stood by the back pew, sipping from a paper cup, white dress, pearl studs, a small circle of women around her as though she were giving out sunshine. She saw me. She smiled the way a person does when they see a neighbor's dog pleasant, distant, and turned her shoulder just enough to make room for my absence. I sat alone 3 rows up and let the choir's first halting chord fill my chest like breath you have to borrow. A hand touched my shoulder. A young woman sat down beside me, twisting a ring around and around. "Mrs. Carter?" she whispered. I nodded, and she looked over her shoulder once like a child about to break a rule. "I used to work at Lakeview Wellness," she said, voice low. "I saw your name on a partner history form and I shouldn't say this, but she's done this before." The air thinned. "Who?" "Rebecca." Her eyes were steady now. "Different man, different mother-in-law, same claims." She suggested the woman was unsafe, began paperwork, got him to sign over decisions, then cut the family out and left. "It's a pattern." I pressed both palms flat against my skirt to keep them still. "Do you have proof?" She hesitated. It is a holy thing, that moment when a stranger decides to risk themselves for truth. She slid a small envelope into my hand and stood. Inside was a printed form with Rebecca's signature, a screenshot of an email from a Jason Lambert, and a short note in pen. "She does this. Please stop her, Hannah." I did not sleep that night. I built what I came to call the binder. I made copies of the receipt, the form, the email. I printed my journal pages and tucked them in page protectors like they were photographs of someone I could still save. I made a calendar and marked the days Michael came home late, the nights Rebecca picked a fight, the mornings I found something missing. When you cannot make someone hear you, build a chorus out of paper. Lillian. Practical and fierce in ways the world often underestimates older women for. Helped me set up a secret email account. Voiceless No More 79. I wrote to one person, Daniel Carter. He was the neighborhood boy who used to eat my cookies and wipe his hands on his shorts because he was too excited to find a napkin. He had a social worker's badge now in Augusta and a voice that had learned how to be careful. I didn't sign my name. The subject line said, "A mother was silenced. A son was lied to." 3 days later the phone rang. "Mrs. Evelyn. Is this really you?" he asked, voice cracking like a boy's. I thought, well, never mind what I thought. Tell me everything. So I did. I told him about the receipt and the checklist and the study door she locked in my own home, about the way my name had become something polite people tried not to say. He said very little. Good listeners don't waste words. 2 weeks after that, a knock came at Lillian's door. I opened it and forgot how to breathe. Michael stood on the stoop with my journal in his hands, and the look of a man who just found out the map he'd been using was drawn to lead him in circles. He didn't speak for a long time. Then his mouth opened and a single word stumbled out, a word I had pressed under my tongue until it hurt. Mama. I didn't fall into his arms. I didn't deliver a speech that would play nicely on television. I stood very still, so still I could hear the clock in Lillian's kitchen counting her seconds, and I let him come close. He smelled like a good cologne chosen by someone else. He put his hand on my shoulder and then both arms around me, and the hug felt unfamiliar, like trying on a coat you owned once but can't quite recognize anymore. I didn't say I forgave him. Forgiveness is not a switch you flip because company is at the door. But I let him hold me, and that is its own kind of truth. We sat at Lillian's table. The coconut cake sat there, stale now, a joke we were done telling. Michael spoke slowly, as if words were heavy coins he had to count before he spent them. She told me you were confused, he said. That you were hiding things from yourself. That you, he swallowed. That you were jealous of her. I almost laughed then, the ugly kind. Jealous of what? Of the way she slid into a life that wasn't hers and rearranged the furniture and called it love. Jealous of being erased? No, I was many things, but I would not let jealous join them. With Daniel's help, we obtained copies of something that made my fingers curl into fists I didn't know I still owned. Preliminary conservatorship paperwork in Rebecca's tidy script, naming me as emotionally unstable, citing possible early memory loss, and this part I read twice, aggressive tendencies. The only thing I'd ever thrown in that house was a damp sponge at a wall I hated the color of. We also found records of $17,000 withdrawn from the emergency account Walter opened back when interest felt like a blessing. The purchase it funded sat in a neat line on another sheet. A down payment, property in her name alone. A woman doesn't have to yell to steal. She only has to plan. I did not want a scene. My life has had enough of those. But truth doesn't always knock politely. Some afternoons, you have to open the door before it shakes the frame. Michael and I drove to Magnolia Street, the number still the same, the porch still in need of paint. I used to say I'd get to once the weather turns. Rebecca opened the door, color drained, then rushed back. And then, almost marvelously, that smile, the one that says I will win because I have decided to. Miss Evelyn, she said, sweet as the tea she never learned to brew right. I thought you'd be at bingo. We need to talk, Michael said. His voice was not kind and not cruel. It was a plank stretched between two roofs. About what? She asked, already reaching for the performance she knew by heart. About the lies, he said. About the conservatorship. About the money. About what you've done to my mother. She gave us tears. She gave us a gasp. She gave us the tilted head of a child who doesn't understand. She hates me, Rebecca whispered. She always has. She's making you choose, but Michael didn't move. He set my journal on the hall table like an altar and said the 4 names that made her face change. Daniel, Hannah, Jason Lambert, records. She went still, and the smile slid off like a mask that had never fit quite right. Then I suppose, she said, and her voice was no longer soft, we'll talk to lawyers. I had been afraid there would be a fight. I had been afraid of another kind of quiet. What came was stranger. Efficiency. She did not battle for the house. She did not beg for the marriage. She packed within a week, moved with the smooth practice of someone who had done this before. Competence is a kind of confession. I moved back under the roof that had watched me raise children and bury a husband and learn the stubborn faith of ordinary days. It smelled wrong. Gray paint where flowers used to climb. My photographs tucked into drawers like secrets. My Bible gone. I started small. Cross above the doorway. Pillows back on the couch. Sunday gravy on the stove because memory likes to travel by salt and steam. I wiped shelves that did not need wiping just to put my hands on something that was mine. Michael came by often. He painted the hall with me and listened when I asked him to leave the brushstrokes imperfect, so the wall didn't look like it had forgotten its age. He took the paperwork to a lawyer who said quiet, patient words like restitution and injunction, and we'll see. We canceled what could be canceled, reversed what could be reversed, and learned to live with the rest. He apologized until there were no new ways to say it. The apology did not fix us, but it kept us from breaking again. In church, the pastor preached on forgiveness the first Sunday I sat in my old pew. Forgiveness, he said, is not letting them off the hook. It is cutting the line that's dragging you under. I held those words in my mouth like a stone, tasting them, turning them smooth. I am not a woman who forgets. I am not a woman who confuses forgiveness with pretending. I want truth, my own and every woman's who has been told she is dramatic when she is, in fact, drowning. So I spoke. First to the pastor in the office with the soft chair and the painting of a river. Then to the women's group, where hands held cups but eyes held stories. Then at a community center gathering on elder emotional abuse, a phrase that sounds clinical until you live it. Word traveled faster than I did. Letters came, emails came, calls from voices I'd never heard before but recognized. Immediately, my son's wife did the same. My daughter says I imagine things she takes from my room. My mother stopped answering the phone because her new caretaker said it was stressing her. We started a small circle that met on Thursday afternoons, rain or shine, tea or tap water. Widows and grandmothers, and a single mother still in her 40s who said she felt old in the ways that counted. We named ourselves the silent. We're never weak because the world likes to pretend quiet means passive. We practiced saying the words that had been used against us: jealous, forgetful, bitter, and handing them back. We learned about documents and boundaries and how to keep copies of everything, even kindnesses. We watched one another get taller without anyone standing up. Sometimes justice looks exactly like that. None of this erased Rebecca. People like her do not become smoke because you open a window. She lingers in the way the front steps creak. She lingers in the habit I have of counting the pills in my bottle twice. She lingers in the heat that rises in my neck when a woman with a polished smile calls me Miss Evelyn and does not mean me any good. But the house hums right again. The magnolia bloomed late, but it bloomed. On a warm evening, I stood beneath the branches and looked up at white petals punched with sun and thought, it is possible to come back to yourself. Michael and I are not what we were, and perhaps that is mercy too. We call more. We name things. When he is quiet, I ask if the quiet is about me. He tells me when it is not. He does not ask for forgiveness as if it were a prize I am keeping from him. He asks for time. I give it in small bowls, refill when I can. We have learned our ordinary again. How to argue without borrowing someone else's script. How to laugh without guilt. How to remember Walter without letting grief take the head of the table. If you are still with me, if your tea has gone cool on your nightstand because you stayed right to me. Put your city and your country below. Tell me if your house ever forgot your name and if you learned to teach it again. I want to see the map of us stretch from Savannah to wherever your sky begins. I want the women in our little Thursday circle to hear where their echoes landed. I used to think justice meant a gavel. I have learned it can also mean a binder on a kitchen table, a paint roller in a son's hand, a stranger in a pew who decides the truth is worth the risk. I don't know if I will ever forgive Rebecca in the way people like to tape onto posters. I do know she no longer gets to decide who I am. And I know this. Silence can be a refuge, but only if it belongs to you. The kind she gave me was a muzzle. The kind I choose now is a pause between sentences I intend to finish. Some nights I still wake and listen for the soft chime of a message that won't come. On those nights I get up, make tea, sit at the table, and write another page. My hand shakes a little, but the ink holds. I write the names of women who wrote to me that day. I draw a small circle around their towns. I whisper them like prayer. And I picture you wherever you are typing a few simple words that mean everything. I'm here, from Boston, from Birmingham, from Bristol, from Bangalore. I picture our stories, separate and the same, rising like lanterns. And I promise you, as long as I can lift a pen, I will keep one lit. They say justice wears a robe and bangs a gavel. People like to picture it loud and final, a door slamming shut and a headline running across a screen. But the justice I met did not arrive with a sound. It slipped into my life like a quiet guest and took a seat where a liar used to sit. It didn't raise its voice. It simply let the truth breathe. The first sign of it came in a pale blue envelope with my name written in careful, wobbly script. No return address. Just Evelyn on the front, like a hand reaching in the dark. Inside was a short note. Mrs. Carter, I read about what happened to you. I thought I was the only one. My daughter-in-law did the same. She told my son I was dangerous. I haven't seen him in 5 years. Thank you for speaking out. You made me feel sane again. Carolyn, Oklahoma City. I sat on the edge of my bed reading it over and over, not because it was dramatic, but because it was familiar. Pain recognizes pain. It nods at it like two women passing on a narrow sidewalk and shifting just enough so neither falls into the street. Before I go on, tell me where you're listening from. Put your name, your city, your country in the comments. I want to see the map this story is drawing. If what happened to me lives in your town too, let another mother find you there. That week my phone rang more than it had in 2 years. Illinois, California, Nova Scotia, Manchester. A woman with a soft Midlands accent said, "Your story made it here, love. We don't talk about mothers like you enough." Some voices trembled. Some voices shook with anger that sounded like mine on the days I couldn't stand to hear myself think. Most of them just needed a witness. They didn't ask me to fix their lives. They asked me to hear the sentence they had been practicing alone in kitchens and in cars and in church parking lots. This happened to me, too. Our little group, the one that began as 5 women and a tray of lemon bars in a church room, outgrew its chairs. We moved to the community center. We dragged a circle of mismatched seats across a scuffed floor that smelled of dust and lemon oil. Lillian set a pitcher of iced tea on a table. I folded napkins the way my mother taught me, corners neat as a prayer. By the time the clock hit 2, 30 women had come through the doors. Most had gray hair. A few were my age, bones talking in their knees but not in their throats anymore. Some were younger than my daughters, wearing work badges clipped to blouses because they couldn't spare the time to go home before finding the courage to sit down. We didn't need a microphone. We needed a circle and the permission to speak. A woman named Joan, short, sharp, eyes bright with the kind of mischief that keeps people alive, pushed me forward. "You started this, Evelyn. You speak first." My heart pounded so hard I could hear it. My hands shook. I stood anyway. "My name is Evelyn Rose Carter. I am 79 years old." My elder daughter-in-law turned my own son against me. But I'm still standing. And now I'm speaking. A sound went through the room, not applause yet, not words. A release. People like to call it bravery, but I have learned bravery often looks exactly like telling the truth in the daytime. When I finished, they did clap. Not out of politeness, out of recognition. It felt like thunder after a funeral. I didn't smile. My mouth wouldn't let me. I just nodded at the faces looking back at me and thought, we are not going to die of this. A week later, young lawyer walked into our circle with a pink leather notebook and a calm way of arranging her pen that made you think of neat solutions. "I'm Tanya Brooks," she said. "I specialize in elder abuse and coercive control. You'd be surprised how often this happens behind closed doors." None of us were surprised. She sat through our stories without flinching, then said, "If anyone wants to talk about options, I'm here." At first no one moved. Then I raised my hand. Justice does not need permission. It needs a door that opens. Tanya came to my house with her notebook and a small stack of forms. We laid my binder on the kitchen table like a patient. She turned the pages like a doctor who has seen these symptoms before. The forged conservatorship attempt. The unauthorized withdrawals. The pattern of manipulation corroborated by third parties, she said, tapping Hannah's note with her pen. What she did isn't only cruel. It may be constructive fraud, Those 3 words did something to the air, not because I was hungry for legal language, but because they were a name for the shape of my wound. When someone names your pain correctly, the room steadies under your feet. I filed the complaint. My hand shook. My signature looked like it had been written on a rocking boat. I filed it anyway. It wasn't a criminal case, not yet, but it was a beginning, and beginnings are stronger than people give them credit for. A reporter found her way to my porch the following Tuesday. Channel 6, local Savannah, she said, standing with a Khmer woman who smelled like sunscreen and coffee. Mrs. Carter, we've had dozens of calls about the support group. Would you be willing to talk on camera? I smoothed my hair with a wet hand and looked down at my cardigan. I'm not sure I have anything new to say, ma'am, the reporter said. You don't have to say anything new. You just have to say what's true. They aired 3 minutes on a Thursday. A shot of me standing by the magnolia tree with a photograph of young Michael in my hand. A few words from women in our circle, faces blurred for the ones who asked. A clip of Tanya explaining pieces of Georgia's elder justice statutes in simple, careful sentences. The anchor closed with, her son may have forgotten her, but Evelyn Carter is making sure the world doesn't. The phone nearly jumped off its hook that night. Letters came by the bundle. A law school wrote to ask if I'd speak about generational gaslighting. A podcast host from New York called and said he'd fly down if I'd let him interview me in my own garden. I didn't want attention. I wanted protection for women like me, for the grandmothers sleeping in finished basements they built for their children, for the mothers who still set an extra plate in case the door opens and the boy they raised walks in. As a man who remembers, not everyone clapped. The Savannah Voice ran a longer article, The Quiet Uprising. How one grandmother sparked a movement with a photo of me in my knitted cardigan that my daughters will tell you doesn't do me any favors. The comment section filled up the way floodwater fills a ditch. Fast, indiscriminate, carrying sticks and shining things. This is my mom's story. Thank you for giving us words. Never thought I'd cry reading the news. And then the others. Sounds bitter. There are 2 sides, boomers blaming their kids again. One person wrote, just another manipulative mother playing the victim. I disown her too. I wish I could tell you it bounced off me. It found a soft place and sat there a while. That was the night I found a letter on my doormat, hand-delivered by someone who knew better than to ring. Plain white envelope, heavier paper. Inside, a cease and desist. You are hereby requested to cease all public statements naming Rebecca Carter. There were more words, all stiff with threat. The next day, a tall woman in a gray suit introduced herself at a community event and said, I represent Miss Carter. She had perfume that cost more than my grocery list and a voice as cold as a courthouse hallway. She handed me another copy of the letter and didn't wait for my answer. I brought it to Tanya. She skimmed, turned the page, and put it face down. It's intimidation, she said. They want you to quiet yourself before you get louder. Truth is not defamation. We have the receipts, still. That night, the doubts crept in under the door like mold under wallpaper. Was I dragging my son's name through the mud to pull myself out of it? Had I gone too far? Was I asking the world to throw stones at a woman who had already taken so much? At 3:17 a.m., when thoughts become their worst selves, the phone rang. Momma, Michael said, voice low. I saw the article. I saw the comments. I just wanted you to know. I'm proud of you. I closed my eyes and swallowed the cry that jumped up like a bird. She's filing something, he went on. But I've talked to my lawyer. I won't stand in her corner again. Not ever. Thank you, I whispered. What I meant was, don't ever leave me in the dark again. After the article, the doors opened wider. A women's shelter asked me to speak on a Tuesday evening where the coffee was strong and the chairs were hard and the listening was tender. A sociology professor had me zoom into a classroom where bright faces in little squares nodded at me from places I had never been. A young journalist came to walk the garden with me, her recorder held like a fragile thing, as if truth might run if she gripped it too hard. And then Tanya called with a voice she saved for good news. They want your binder, she said. A subcommittee in DC Aging and Elder Rights. Closed session on emotional coercion and family displacement. They want to hear from you. I had not been on a plane in 24 years. The last time I flew, Walter slept through the takeoff and woke to offer me half his peanuts like he'd invented generosity. I wore my lavender jacket and slipped Lillian's rosary into my left hand for the parts where the earth falls away from you and you have to trust men you've never met to carry you through the sky. I carried the binder in my right. The room in Washington was not glamorous gray walls, a long table, 5 nameplates. I felt my knees as I stood. I looked each of them in the eye. When your own child turns on you, I said, not because of what you did, but because someone else rewrote the story first, it feels like being buried alive. I didn't come here for sympathy. I came because the next woman this happens to might not have a sister like Lillian or a lawyer like Tanya. She might not survive it. Please let her story be heard while she's still alive to tell it. Afterward, a staffer pressed my hand and said, "Thank you for bringing paper. People forget that paper is power." I smiled because if I had learned anything, it was that faith without copies is dead. Hannah, the young woman who first warned me from Lakeview, sent a letter that arrived at twilight when the house feels honest. "You saved more people than you'll ever know," she wrote. "Old age doesn't make you weak. It gives you a longer memory of what the world tries to forget." I put her note in the front pocket of the binder, where Walter's picture used to be when I needed strength of a different kind. A producer from 60 Minutes called. I said no twice and then yes because Lillian said, "If you have breath, use it where it counts." They came with lights that turned my living room into noon. They put too much makeup on me and asked the same question 3 different ways. "Why did you speak out?" When the cameras read I stared at me, I said, "Because I was never the villain. I was the mother who stayed quiet too long. If you're still with me, tell me where you are. Your city, your country." There's a woman in our Thursday circle who said she sleeps better when she knows the places we've reached. I want to read your names to her the way we read Psalms. The gray-suited woman sent another letter. Tanya sent one back with citations that felt like shields. The complaint turned into discovery. The discovery turned into agreements with signatures that acknowledged things people had said didn't happen. Some money came back. Not all. The world rarely gives back everything it takes, but enough to prove a point. The attempted conservatorship was withdrawn with language so careful it bent around the truth without touching it. We kept the documents anyway. Justice came in other ways too. Small ones. A porch swing holding my weight without complaining. The magnolia blooming thick and late, as if it had been waiting for me to look up. Michael sitting at my table with a brush in his hand, painting the hall a shade we chose together and leaving the roller marks because I asked him to. He apologized in the middle of the stairwell where sound carries. He apologized at the sink. He apologized on the lawn when he thought I couldn't hear him. I told him to stop asking me to erase what happened. "Let's learn to live with it," I said. Like scar tissue, it holds you together in a new way. The group kept growing. We changed nothing about the room except the number of chairs and the amount of tissue on the table. We started keeping a small box by the door labeled receipts, where women could drop copies of things they were afraid would vanish. We made a list of lawyers who returned calls. We practiced sentences together. "No, you may not talk to my doctor without me present. Yes, I will be keeping a copy. No, I am not confused." We taught one another how to hold a phone steady while recording. We held our grief like babies and our resolve like a book we would not put down. People ask me what justice looks like now. It looks like a binder on a kitchen table and a woman in a cardigan who is not embarrassed to ask for a supervisor. It looks like a son who says, "I was wrong," without asking for a parade. It looks like a reporter who spells your name right and a pastor who says forgiveness is not the same as pretending. It looks like a quiet porch at dusk and a pen that still works when your hand shakes. One evening, I sat under the magnolia with a stack of letters tied up with string. I read them until the light thinned and the words blurred, and then I read the cities out loud like a roll call. Oklahoma City, Leeds, Toronto, Fresno, Charlotte, Boise, Dublin, Halifax, Austin. Lillian came out with 2 cups of tea and said, "You planning to call the whole world?" I said, "If they write, I will learn their names. I do not want revenge. I want a world where women like me don't have to prove they aren't dangerous before they're allowed to be believed. Where sons remember that mama is not a childish word but a covenant. Where justice doesn't shout to be real. Some days it wears glasses and arthritis gloves and sits on a porch swing writing down the truth before someone else writes over it. Some days it is a pink notebook on a young lawyer's lap. Some days it is an email from a stranger who says, "You made me feel sane again." And some days, when you are very lucky, it is your own voice, steady at last, finding its way through a quiet room and hearing, from more places than you knew existed, a soft answer. "I hear you. I'm here." They say life slows down when you grow old. Maybe the steps do, but some things only learn to move faster. The ache in your bones on rainy mornings, the restless swirl of thoughts at 2 in the night, the echo of memories that never stop knocking. I thought I'd made peace with my past. I thought I had walked through the worst of it and come out with a voice and a binder and a steadier hand. But the past doesn't always come back to hurt you. Sometimes it comes to ask you a question. What will you do for the ones who come next? Before I go on, tell me where you're listening from. Write your name, your city, your country in the comments. If you found me in Savannah, I want to find you back Boston, Birmingham, Bristol, Vancouver, wherever you are. The map of us matters. It tells the next woman she isn't standing alone on her porch. It was a Monday, the kind that wears a gray sky and a heavy shirt of humidity. I was sipping black coffee in my rocker, counting the breaths between thunder rumbles, when I heard a knock. 3 of them, not hurried, not timid. Sure, when I opened the door, she was there. 20-something, maybe 28, maybe younger, with long brown hair and a braid that had given up on neatness. Her eyes were red, like someone who hadn't slept or hadn't stopped crying. She held her phone in one hand and clutched a canvas tote with the other like it contained every important piece of her life. She didn't speak. She held out a folded newspaper clipping, and there I was, my face staring back at me from the grainy rectangle. "You're her," she whispered. I stepped aside. "Come in." She perched on the edge of my couch like a bird who doesn't quite trust the branch. "My name is Emily," she said, and then the sentences came the way truth does when it finally finds a room that won't punish it. Her mother-in-law had been kind, the soup-bringing, bracelet-giving kind, gentle hands and practical comforts. But her husband began to say words that sour sweetness, manipulative, controlling, divisive. He said his mother was trying to come between them. He said love needed walls. Emily believed him. One day he told his mother to leave for a while. She never came back. Last month he said she was dead to him. Emily checked. Dead was a word the living sometimes use when they want to stop hearing a name. The woman was alive, tucked away in a facility with a window that faced a parking lot. "I read your story," Emily said, the skin under her eyes trembling the way a voice does when it's been strong for too long. I think I helped do to her what that woman did to you." She didn't sob. She shook, the silent kind that starts in your hands and goes everywhere. Shame is heavy when it first lets itself breathe. I didn't give her a speech. I put the kettle on. I set a cup in front of her and skimmed the tea bag along the surface until the water turned the color my mother used to call brown enough to tell the truth. We sat. I listened. Presence can be the only stitch a torn place will accept. In the morning, she handed me a letter, folded twice, written in blue ink. "It's for her," she said. "For Martha, dear Martha. I believed the wrong person. I was young. I was scared. I let someone turn your kindness into a threat. I want to see you, and if you'll let me, I want to tell you I'm sorry to your face." "Do you think she'll forgive me?" Emily asked. I told her the only honest thing I had. Maybe not right away. but she will remember that you tried. Sometimes that's the first door that opens. 3 weeks later, Emily called from a parking lot that sounded like wind. She had gone to see Martha. She held her hand and read the letter out loud. Martha didn't speak. She cried the quiet cry, the kind you hear in the breath between words. The nurse brought tissues and pretended to tidy the tray. When Emily hung up, she didn't say she felt better. She said she felt true. That night, I sat with my journal and wrote, "The worst lies aren't shouted. They're whispered over time, dripped into tea, folded into smiles, disguised as protection. But truth has a shape. If you live long enough, you learn to recognize it, even when someone has tried to blur it with kind words." I saw things in Emily that hurt and soothed me at once. The hopeful Navette I wore like perfume at her age, the eagerness to please, the way fear can be dressed up as loyalty until you can't tell the difference. But I also saw something I never had then, a second chance sitting in my living room, asking what to do next. My story wasn't just mine. It had become a lantern, and every time I lit it, another shadow stepped forward with a face. The county asked me to speak to a room of young couples a few weeks after that. I didn't want to. I am old enough to know that saying certain things in front of people who haven't lived them can feel like dropping a glass and waiting for the sound you know is coming. But I went. A folding chair room, the smell of lemon polish and nerves. I told them a short truth. "Listen to your spouse, yes," I said, "but don't silence your mother to prove it. Don't hand your loyalty to someone who needs you to forget where you came from." A healthy marriage doesn't require burying your parents alive. Some faces softened, some hardened, some looked at their laps. Planting seeds is a quiet business. You don't get to see which ones catch. The next morning, my phone buzzed with 4 words from Michael. "I'm listening more now." I stared at the screen a long time. I didn't reply, not because I didn't care, but because sometimes the most faithful answer is to leave space for the next sentence. There are photographs the world never sees. They've captured me smiling at a microphone, shaking hands in rooms where the carpet quiets your footsteps, holding a binder on my lap like an old friend. They don't see the other pictures. Lillian's hand over mine in the church parking lot before Washington. Me in the bathroom with my palm pressed to my chest after I read the comment that called me a bitter, unwanted crone. Me sitting on the floor with a cardboard box of Michael's childhood drawings, reading to Momma for the 37th time and asking a God who knows more than I do how that boy learned to look away. Those moments are justice too, not the loud kind. The kind that happens when you tell yourself the truth in the quietest room of the house and decide to keep going. Emily started coming by on Mondays. She'd sit at my table and we'd write letters, hers to Martha, mine to women whose names had begun to pile on my dresser in pale blue envelopes. We worked out practical sentences for her to carry home. "I love you and I won't participate in cutting your mother off. That's not protecting us. That's isolating her. No, I won't lie," she would rehearse, shoulders hunched, and then straighten and say it again. Courage is a muscle. It remembers whatever you train it to do. One of those afternoons, the doorbell rang and delivered a small, mean envelope with a sharp-edged name in the corner, another letter from a lawyer in a gray suit who believed paper could frighten a woman who had learned to make paper fight for her. Tanya answered it with citations that stacked like stones. "They will keep trying," she told me, calm as always. That's what power does when it meets its match. When Emily left that day, she stood on the porch and looked at the magnolia. "It's beautiful," she said. "It's late," I answered, "but it's beautiful anyway." She nodded like we were talking about more than a tree. The first time Emily tried to speak up at home, it didn't go well. She came back with mascara shadows and a laugh that sounded like scraped plate. "He said I'm choosing his mother over him," she told me. "He said I'm disloyal." I put a sandwich in front of her and poured milk the way I used to when Michael came home with knees scraped open by other boys' words. "The truth always sounds like betrayal to someone married to the lie," I said. "Keep going." She took a bite. "You cannot repair anyone on an empty stomach." We talked about practical protection too. Names of counselors who understood coercion, the small safety of a packed overnight bag, how to screenshot, how to send documents to an email no one else could open, who would pick her up at 1 in the morning if her courage ran into a wall. Lillian added her number to that list in blue pen and underlined it twice. It would be a prettier story if I told you Michael and Emily's husband learned the lesson at the same speed. They didn't. Some men move like rivers when you pull the stone out of their path. Some men circle the stone until they call it an island and build a flag. Emily kept writing, kept visiting Martha. On the third visit, Martha said her name. The fourth time, she asked for the bracelet she had given her on her wedding day. Emily brought it. 2 thin crescents of metal catching the window light. I thought you'd pawned it, Martha said. Never, Emily answered, and a whole room exhaled. I was invited to a podcast and then a classroom and then a town hall where the floor groaned with every chair dragged into our kind of circle. I said yes more than I wanted to because I had learned that every time I lit the lantern, another shadow stepped forward with a face I could learn and a name I could write down. The more we said the words constructive fraud, coercive control, financial exploitation, the less monstrous they felt. Naming things takes their teeth away. Michael started showing up on Thursdays because that's when our group meets and he likes to carry chairs. He sits in the back. He doesn't talk much. He looks at the door sometimes when a woman says something that sounds like his mother and then looks at me like he's taking roll. After one meeting, he handed me a photo from his wallet, the edges soft with years. It was 6-year-old him in a paper crown at the church picnic, his arms slung around my neck, both of us laughing at something just out of the frame. I forgot this woman, he said, tapping the boy. I won't forget again. We don't hug like we used to. We stand near each other in a way that feels honest. Tell me where you are now. The city, the country. Type it out. Our Thursday circle keeps a list and reads it out loud sometimes when the room is tired. Winnipeg, Glasgow, Phoenix, Savannah, Delhi, Dublin, Cape Town, Seattle. It wakes the spine. There is a photograph on my kitchen wall now, not the kind the paper prints, but the kind I look at when I am in danger of calling myself small. It's Emily on my porch steps with a stack of stamped envelopes on her knee, smiling the tired, alive smile of a woman who stopped borrowing a stranger's script. The day we took it, she wore the bracelet Martha asked for. She twisted it on her wrist while we went over the next hard sentence she was going to say at home. I love you, and I won't help you erase your mother. She practiced until her mouth knew how to carry the meaning without apology. What I learned this year is simple and hard. Survival is not the end of the story. It is the place from which you start telling it. Justice didn't knock on my door and ask for a statement. A girl did. She wasn't mine, not by blood, but by the shared bruise of women who have watched someone try to rewrite them. She asked me what to do. I gave her tea and a chair and the words I had spent a lifetime learning the slow way. She did the brave part herself. Some nights I still wake at 2 and hear the old silence tapping on the window like a branch. On those nights, I turn on the kitchen light and read aloud the names we've collected. I pour them like a line of lanterns down a dark road. Emily and Martha, Carolyn in Oklahoma City, Hannah from Lakeview, Joan with the bright eyes, Tanya with the pink notebook, Lillian with the underlined number. I add a new one each week from the comments. A city I've never seen, a country I've never stood in, a woman who says, me too, and then, here's what I did next. The ache in my bones is still quick on rainy days. The thoughts still whirl sometimes, but the knocking has changed. It sounds less like fear now and more like visitors. It sounds like the girl on my doorstep, and the room of young faces learning the sound of a healthy promise, and my son walking in without a script and setting a chair down without being asked. It sounds like the next woman's footsteps on the path to my porch, sure and steady, 3 knocks that say she knows where to come when she needs a witness who will open the door. They say the sun makes everything softer when it rises clean and gold over Savannah. That morning, it climbed the magnolia and laid warm hands on my porch as if to bless the day. But grief doesn't listen to weather, and forgiveness doesn't bloom just because the flowers do. I was sweeping the hallway where she'd stripped my roses from the wall and painted over our years with gray when I heard the knock 3 taps. Not urgent, not timid, familiar. Before I go on, tell me where you are listening from. Your name, your city, your country. Type it below so this old voice knows it isn't echoing off empty walls. When stories travel, the next mother finds her way back home a little faster. I opened the door and there he was with a showbox tucked to his chest like contraband. No flowers, no speech, no bright, sorry boy smile he used to wear when he broke a window with a baseball and cried in the hallway waiting to confess. Just that box and eyes I hadn't seen since he was 12, afraid and honest at the same time. Can I come in? He asked. I opened the door. My feet stepped back. My heart stayed where it was. He set the box on the kitchen table, the same pine table where Walter carved his initials into the underside with a pocket knife just to prove to time that he had been here. He didn't speak. He lifted the lid as if he were unwrapping something dangerous, and I saw our years, folded small to fit, scissored school drawings with the glue long since gone to dust, birthday cards that still glittered in the corners, a rough seashell from Tybee, white and ridged with a streak of pink, the one he pressed into my palm at 7 and said, "For your collection, Mama, so you can hear the ocean when you're cooking." My old church fan with the picture of Jesus in the garden, he used to steal it to swat mosquitoes on hot Sundays until an usher gave us that look. At the bottom, sealed in a plastic bag, a yellow sticky note in a child's careful, shaky hand. "When I grow up, I'll take care of you like you take care of me." Something inside me gave like a rotten porch step. Not a collapse, not yet, just that hollowness you hear before the board breaks. We sat. He watched the wood grain like it might answer for him. "I found it in the attic," he said finally. "I thought I'd thrown it out." "You didn't," I said. "No, but I almost did." Honesty can hurt more than a lie. Lies at least come wrapped in distance. Truth stands close. "What do you want from me, Michael?" I asked. My voice didn't rise. Old women don't waste breath on volume. "I don't know," he said. "A chance to say I was wrong. A chance to fix it." "You can't fix what you won't look at," I said. "And you can't understand," a wound from across the room. "Then help me," he said. "Help me understand. Do you remember the fever?" I asked. 9 years old, burning, whispering even in your sleep. He frowned, searching. "I remember the cold cloth. Your hand," you said. "Don't leave." I don't trust anyone else. I let the words hang until they found a place to land. That boy is still inside you. But somewhere along the way you stopped trusting the one person who carried you through fire because she told you I was the flame. He looked up. The red started in his eyes, the wet not yet. "I thought I was protecting her," he said. "She made everything sound like an attack. Every look you gave, every silence. Passive-aggressive," she'd say. "She doesn't want me here. This isn't my home." She never yelled. She raised her eyebrows. She tilted a tone. She asked questions that weren't questions. "That's how it was done," I said. "Not with shouting, with arrangement." He nodded like a man cataloging his own gullibility. He didn't stay for coffee. He stood to go and touched the showbox once with his fingertips, the way a person tests a surface to see if it's still hot. When the door closed, I didn't cry. I cleaned. Not because the house was dirty, but because that is how a Southern woman stands up without standing up. I scrubbed the baseboards and dusted spines that had already been dusted and pulled her candles golden amber, white jasmine, peach petal out of their places and pitched them into a garbage bag without ceremony. Each toss sounded like the word no. That night, I opened the door to the room that still believed in him. The twin bed, the baseball posters curling at the corners, the desk where he wrote to Santa at 13 just in case. The ceiling still held the glow stars we stuck up there with our arms aching. I sat on the bed and whispered to them, "Where did you go, baby?" How did I lose you while standing right beside you? The next week, I began the work of teaching the house to remember me. Not remodeling, just restoration. I found the floral wallpaper Walter and I had chosen when Michael was 10 soft pinks and greens that looked like Sunday morning if Sunday were a flower. I took down the cold framed prints she had hung shapes that meant nothing and set our wedding photo back where it belonged. Walter's Bible returned to the living room table the way a compass finds north when your hands stop shaking. It wasn't vengeance, it was recollection. One night my phone buzzed. A voice note, not a call. Cowards use text to dodge a heartbeat. Brave men use it when they can't yet trust their voice to carry the weight. I pressed play. Hey mama, he said. I walked by the lake today, the one where we fed the ducks. I sat on that bench for an hour. I remembered telling you I'd never leave you. And then I did. I'm sorry. I don't expect forgiveness. I want to be your son again. In the dark, I held the phone to my chest like a small, warm thing. Then earn it, I whispered. Not into the phone, into the room where the walls could hear. Apologies don't become bridges until feet cross them. If you're still with me, tell me where you are, city and country. I want to see the places these words land. Somewhere, a mother like me is reading the names out loud so she can sleep. The month unspooled into smaller kindnesses. He started repairing what he could touch. A squeak in the bedroom door he'd ignored for years. A step he tightened with new screws. Paint we rolled together down the hall in strokes that didn't erase the wall's age. He didn't ask me to say the word forgive. He brought the showbox every time, as if keeping it near made him more honest. Then the phone rang at 11:42 on a night when no good news knocks. I had my glasses down my nose and my Bible open to Psalms when Joan's voice broke in with words that turned the air into stone. She's gone, Evelyn. My Alyssa. She's gone. Gone where? I asked, though of course I knew. No note, no reason. Just the kind of quiet that leaves a room forever. The church smelled of lilies and wet coats. Alyssa's casket was small and white and wrong. Joan held a ball of tissue like it was the only rope left between her and the earth. Our women wore gray scarves and sat without speaking. Grief makes its own sound and we honored it by not interrupting. People asked if there was a note. There wasn't. Maybe that made it worse. Maybe it meant we had missed something we should have felt in the air. I went home and could not look at my binder or my journal. What good are our words if they can't pull a living girl back from a ledge we never saw? 2 days later, Joan stood in my kitchen with eyes that had learned a new color. You told us speaking was power, she said, her voice all gravel and edges. Where was that power when my granddaughter tied a knot? Truth can be a blade when grief holds it. I reached for her hand. She pulled away. Another loss, different shape. At our next circle, the chairs didn't know each other. Some women were angry. Some couldn't look at me. Martha, soft-spoken with the steel hair, said, maybe we shouldn't meet anymore. It hurts too much, another said. We tell our stories and the world keeps swallowing. Girls, the room felt like a courtroom and I was on trial for promising a kind of safety I could never give. That night, I lowered myself to the kitchen floor and pressed my cheek to the tile for something cold to argue with. Strong is a costume people will sew onto you when they need one more pillar to hold up their ceiling. I whispered to God the worst question I had. Am I helping or am I handing out hope like cheap candles that gutter when the wind rises? The silence afterward did not comfort me. It simply refused to argue. The Savannah paper ran a headline with my name under it, and a question that made me smaller than a photograph. Are words enough? I stayed inside for 3 days. Lillian left soup and knocked twice and didn't ask me to come to the door. On the third afternoon, Tanya strode into my kitchen and dropped a folder on the table hard enough to wake the wood. This is why you don't stop, she said. Numbers, charts, columns, rising elder coercion, rising suicides tied to control and cruelty too smart to leave bruises. Do you want Alyssa to be a line in a report? She asked, or a name that turns a room? Lawyers can be kinder than pastors when the moment calls for it. This isn't the time to fold, she said. This is when you roar. We went back to City Hall. I wore the cardigan with a pulled thread, the one I always forget to mend. The microphone smelled like other people's nerves. I held up a photograph of a girl who should have lived long enough to hate her hair at 50 and said words that didn't shake. You're arguing numbers, I said to the council. I'm carrying names. The room got quiet in the way that means something has finally been heard. That evening Michael came and found me on the porch, staring at a magnolia that refused to bloom like it was waiting for a sign from underground. I don't deserve to say this, he said, but I'm proud of you. I turned. Don't be proud, I said. Be present, he nodded, and for the first time in years the nod felt like a promise he intended to keep. A week later Joan came back. Rage had set, grief still bright as a blade, but her hand didn't pull away when I reached for it. She set a single rose from the funeral bouquet on my table. She believed you, she said. That's why she came. Don't stop. Scar tissue is how bodies remember. Our circle didn't heal pretty, but it held. I lit a candle that night for Alyssa, not to call her back. Candles don't do that, but to keep her from disappearing into the kind of forgetting that kills twice. I wrote in my journal, justice doesn't always keep the living alive. Sometimes it keeps the dead from being erased. Then I turned the page and wrote the names of every city and country I could remember from the comments and the letters: Oklahoma City, Toronto, Manchester, Boise, Dublin, Halifax, Austin, Delhi, until the ink felt like prayer. If you are still here, if your tea has gone cold because you stayed, tell me where you're listening from. Your city, your country. Somewhere a woman in our Thursday circle will read your name out loud and remember that this fight crosses oceans. Somewhere a son will see the list and understand that love does not die. It learns to be brave. I don't know if love survives betrayal the way romance novels promise it does. I know mine learned to speak without asking permission. I know my son learned how to sit on a porch with his hands empty and his heart open. I know a house can forget you and be taught again. I know a showbox can be heavier than a suitcase and a sticky note can weigh more than a law. I know the girl on my doorstep chose truth over comfort, and that choice lit a path for others. And I know this: when the knock comes, sure, not timid, not urgent, you open the door. You make tea. You sit. You listen until the story finds its shape. Then you hand over a sentence, a chair, a small courage. And when the room empties, you write down their names so the world cannot say it didn't happen here. Weeks passed before she returned, the young woman who had stood on my porch with guilt in her eyes and a letter folded like a bandage in her hand. When Emily came back, she didn't tremble. Her shoulders were set, her voice held. She forgave me, she said, and then corrected herself with a small, steady breath. Not with words, with her hand. She held mine, and that's enough. But I don't want to just live with forgiveness. I want to live with purpose. Will you teach me how? Teach. The word landed heavy. I am not a teacher in the way schools mean it. But when someone asks you for a map out of hell, you don't point vaguely toward a horizon and wish them luck. I put the kettle on and set 2 cups on the table. First, I told her, while the steam rose, don't let silence sit too long. It grows roots. Once it does, it convinces you it belongs there. She wrote that down like she was catching a firefly in a jar. Second, write everything. Dates, words, the jokes that were knives. You're not being dramatic, you're keeping a record so your mind doesn't get talked out of itself. Another line caught. Third, never fight to be loved by someone who needs you small. The cost of shrinking is always your life. She wrote that one slowly, as if she intended to live by it. I realized I was saying the rules out loud for me as much as for her. Before I go further, tell me where you're listening from. Your name, your city, your country. Leave it below. The map we're making matters. If a girl like Emily is out there in your town, I want her to see how many lights are on our next Thursday circle. Emily asked if she could record me. Not for me, she said. For the girls my age who won't walk into a room like this. They scroll. Maybe if they see you, they'll listen. I didn't want my face in people's pockets. I didn't want to become a clip to argue about in a comment war or a punchline for a man who has never had to beg to be believed. I thought of Alyssa. I nodded. We didn't plan anything. I spoke the way I have spoken 100 times, with my hands wrapped around a paper cup. They don't always scream when they break you, I said. Sometimes they whisper. Sometimes they smile. Sometimes they convince the person you love most that you are the enemy. That is abuse too. It leaves scars you can't photograph. Emily posted the minute and a half and went home. By morning, there were 1.3 million views and a number of messages I could not have counted even when my eyes were young. A nurse in Boston wrote, "Your words saved me last night." A college student in London said, "My boyfriend does this." I thought I was crazy. "Thank you." A grandmother in Canada said, "I lost my son too." I thought it was only me. For every hand reaching out, another pointed a finger. Drama, bitter, boomers. A woman wrote, "Why should we care about one grandmother's sob story?" I set the phone down and breathed. Criticism only sticks now when it rhymes with an old lie in my head. Those lies don't sing to me anymore. NBC called. Tanya said say yes before I found the breath to say no. In the studio, lights made noon out of nothing and a small microphone tugged at the neck of my cardigan. "What do you say to people who think you're holding grudges?" the interviewer asked with the clean smile of someone who has never had to hold a binder like a life raft. I looked into the camera. "Grudges rot," I said. "This isn't rot. This is remembrance. Remembrance keeps abuse from repeating." That night sleep wouldn't come. The soundstage had opened a door inside me that I had bricked up long ago. I remembered my mother's voice and the man she married after my father died. He never hit her. He hit her with doubt. "Too sensitive," he'd say. Lucky I stayed. Her tears were embarrassing. I was 12, small in the kitchen doorway, promising myself, I will never let anyone treat me like that. Promises made by girls do not always survive the men they meet. When Rebecca turned my son, I wasn't just losing Michael. I was hearing the echo of a vow I couldn't keep. History doesn't always repeat. Sometimes it echoes, and you feel the sound in your bones. The next Thursday, I took my usual chair and Emily stood in mine. Her notebook trembled in her hands, but her voice kept its line. "My name is Emily," she said. I let someone convince me my mother-in-law was the problem. I erased her. I believed lies. I nearly destroyed her. She forgave me. The cycle ends with me. The room did not applaud. The room cried in the honest way, shoulders shaking, faces turned unabashed, hands reaching for hands. We weren't hearing a speech. We were hearing a second voice rise beside the first. I felt less alone than I had in years. Messages kept coming. Some were young men. "You surprise me," still asking how to say sorry to a mother without turning the apology into a request for absolution. I told them what I tell my son. Apologies don't become bridges until feet cross them. Michael sent 4 words after seeing the clip. "I'm listening more now." I put the phone face down and let the words sit like bread on a table. Presents first. Talk later. If you're still here, if your tea has gone cold, tell me your city and country. I'm reading them out loud on Thursday nights. I want the women in our circle to hear how far a whisper can travel when it refuses to be quiet. Night came heavy 1 week later, the kind of Georgia heat that makes the air feel like it's holding secrets. I took my binder to the porch and let the swing complain beneath me. The magnolia moved like a slow thought. Michael pulled into the drive, cut the engine, and came to sit beside me the way he did as a boy who feared thunder. "I need to tell you everything," he said. "Not just pieces." He stared at his hands. "She told me you hated her from the beginning. That you said no woman would be good enough for me. That you whispered about her at church." My breath tightened. "I never." He held up his hand. "I know. Now. Back then, I believed her because I wanted to. It was easier than seeing I had given her the wheel. When you tried to warn me, I told myself you were jealous, that you couldn't let go. That's why I shut you out. I chose her lies over your love. The truth didn't surprise me. It confirmed the bruise I already carried. There's a pain to having the ache named out loud. There's also a strange relief. Now we were in the same room with it. The next morning, Tanya brought an envelope with no return address and handwriting I would recognize at the end of the world. I thought about fire. I thought about trash. I slid it open. "You won," it said in a hand that had never learned how to apologize. "You have your son back. The town believes you. The world pities you. But don't fool yourself. He will never fully forgive you for the resentment I planted. And you'll never fully forgive him for choosing me. That's the bond we share now. The ruin between you are no confession, no remorse, just poison refined." I slid the letter into a plastic sleeve in the binder and wrote a small note. Evidence. Even venom deserves to be recorded so no one can rebrand it later as perfume. 2 weeks later, I stood on a stage in Washington under lights that made me wish for my porch lamp. The room was full survivors, students, staffers, a few faces that have made laws and a few faces that have broken them. My knees remembered their age. My voice did not. "My name is Evelyn Rose Carter. I am 79 years old." My elder daughter-in-law turned my own son against me. But this isn't just my story. I watched heads lift. Abuse isn't only bruises. Sometimes it's whispers. Sometimes it's a smile that convinces your child to see you as the enemy. Sometimes it's a silence that kills, the quiet after that was clean, the kind that means a room is taking the words inside. The applause felt like weather breaking outside that room. Not everyone clapped. People on television weighed me like produce. Exaggeration? Generational bitterness? How much blame belongs to the son? But for every pundit, there were 100 letters in blue envelopes and emails with subject lines that began, "I thought I was alone until." A girl from Phoenix wrote, "I played your clip for my boyfriend and then for myself. I left." A man from Ohio wrote, "I called my mother. That was enough." Michael kept coming. He sanded the porch rail and fixed the step that had been threatening to throw me for 2 years. He mowed the lawn without being asked. We learned a new way to sit at the kitchen table in the morning to cups, 2 spoons, the news turned down, words arriving when they wanted to be true. We did not pretend nothing happened. We did not demand a ribbon to tie around what broke. Healing asked only what love asks when it's tired. Be here. One evening, before the light left the room, I wrote what felt like a last kind of entry. Justice doesn't always come in handcuffs. Sometimes it comes when your son says, "Mama," without bracing. Sometimes it comes when a girl like Emily stands up and speaks and a room cries instead of clapping. Sometimes it comes when strangers in cities you'll never see read your story and find their own. Justice isn't revenge. It isn't forgetting. It's release. I took Rebecca's letter out to the magnolia and struck a match. Paper curls fast when it surrenders. The ash lifted like it had been trying to leave since it was written. I didn't say anything ceremonial. Michael stood beside me and did not reach for his phone or a broom or a solution. When the last corner went to smoke, I reached for his hand. He didn't let go. "If you found me tonight, if these words found you, tell me your city and your country. Type them where I can see them. Share this with someone who needs a lantern. Somewhere a woman is sitting under a tree that refuses to bloom, wondering if love can survive betrayal. Show her our map. Show her how far a second voice can carry." They tried to silence me. They tried to make me doubt my own mind. They turned my own son against me, but I am still here, and I will not be quiet anymore, because my story is not just mine. It belongs to every mother, every grandmother, every woman who was erased by whispers and forgotten in her own home. If my voice reached you today, don't let it stop here. Type your name, your city, your country. Because betrayal like this does not belong to one place. It can happen anywhere. To any family, if you believe truth should never stay hidden, subscribe. Like this video. Share it with one person who needs to hear it. And if you are that woman, or you love one, write this in the comments. I hear you. Let her see it. Let her feel it. Because somewhere right now, A woman is sitting in silence, wondering if she still matters. Let her hear us. Let her know she is not alone. I am Evelyn Rose Carter. I am 79 years old, and this was my justice.